We have our friend Senator Tim Scott. You know, Senator Scott, it would seem to me you've known Nikki Haley a long time, and when you're running against nobody in Nevada and you lose by a crushing defeat where nobody gets over 60% and you get something in the 30s, don't you think it's time to hang it up?
Mark Levin, I tell you, I've always said it. I said it about you on the air. I said it when you're not listening to me. I said it when you're nowhere in the same state. You just speak the truth. The bottom line is a very simple bottom line, Mark. When you lose to no one on the ballot, it is time to hang it up, endorse Donald Trump, and move on. Because the American people, the conservative movement, is squarely behind Donald Trump. Undeniable, unequivocal, time for us to focus on the disaster called Joe Biden, the disaster of terrible foreign policy, the disaster of failing economics for poor people, middle-class Americans, working-class Americans, people working paycheck to paycheck, and a disaster for our allies. Every moment we're not talking about Joe Biden is an abdication of our responsibility as leaders of the conservative movement. We need to rally behind Donald Trump right now, Mark.
I mean, she's embarrassing and humiliating herself. She's going on TV and she's saying, you know, the Republicans need to have bipartisan legislation. We don't need to have bipartisan legislation if the legislation is even worse than the problem. What kind of thinking is that?
Think about it, Mark. You're 100% right, Mark. The truth is, on the current bill that was being proposed that I voted against today, and it failed, thankfully, it would allow up to 5,000 illegal immigrants in our country every day. 365, the number of days in a year, except for this is leap year, Mark. That's 366. That's another 5,000 on top of last year on average. That's 1.8 million illegal immigrants. To codify that as law is to make us complicit with the liberal progressive party that wants open borders. We cannot be that party. I don't want to associate myself with a party that says illegal immigration, the greatest invasion in American history, is brought to you by Republicans and Democrats. Count me out.
And, you know, we have Joe Biden, who a month ago, his Secretary of DHS, all their mouthpieces in the media, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and the rest in the conga line, telling us a month ago the border was secure. You've been in those hearings. The border's secure. He says it on it's secure. Now all of a sudden it's not secure, and it's Trump's fault, MAGA's fault, and everybody's fault but Joe Biden. You think they're going to get away with these flat-out psychopath-type lies?
You know, the good news is when you look at the polls suggest, polls don't vote, but they suggest that Donald Trump has taken the lead in the battleground states because Americans like common sense, and they're turning away from the national media that seems to be in lockstep with Joe Biden and his reelection. Think about the fact in Georgia, in North Carolina, in West Virginia, not really a battleground state, by the way, in Ohio, in Montana, in Pennsylvania, President Trump leads Joe Biden. Why? Because the number one issue is the invasion coming across our southern border. The number one issue is whether or not Joe Biden is allowing sleeper cells to exist in our country because he allows our southern border to be wide open. I'm not suggesting he wants them. I am, however, suggesting that when you let 10 million illegal immigrants in our country, the consequence of that is putting American lives in jeopardy unnecessarily. That's why we are better off with Trump. And frankly, the number two issue is our economy. And Mark, you and I know it. People living paycheck to paycheck are being decimated under Joe Biden's Bidenomics. Inflation 18% since he's taken office. That means people living paycheck to paycheck have to make a decision of rationing medicine, rationing gas, rationing energy, rationing food. This is a real crisis for Americans. And Joe Biden wants you to believe that it's Donald Trump's fault or the Republicans' fault when he had every tool he needed to close the southern border. If Donald Trump got it done without legislation, Joe Biden can too. He refused to do so.
You know, Senator, I've offered on this radio show $1 million to Joe Biden that I can prove to him that he has the power right now to begin to secure that border. $1 million. I'll use American dollars. He can use Chinese currency. He can do whatever he wants. But I'm saying $1 million on the table right now that I'm right and he's wrong. Now, I know that's not going to happen. But still, you know, I know, Biden knows and the media know that he has the power today to do this. It's a power that's been exercised for half a century, not just to secure a border, but to deport people. And one of the problems with this bill is not only the 5,000 number and all the legalese that's in there, if it hits a certain number, how many days, but there's language in there that a president can scuttle the whole thing if he thinks it's in our national security interest to have 10,000 people a day or 20,000 a day. And if Biden won't enforce the current law, what would stop him from exercising that authority under this supposed law?
Not a single thing, Mark. That's the problem. You codify catch and release into our country. You make it easier for the Democrats, the liberals, the progressives, the people who don't like America as we are. You allow them to say that it was conservatives that agreed to keep the border open. It was conservatives who agreed on an asylum policy change. It was conservatives who agreed with allowing people into our country without a proper vetting system. We need to have black and white, right and wrong, left and right. We stand with common sense. We stand with the American people. We stand on closing our southern border. We stand on, let's finish the wall. Don't sell the pieces. The construction material has been sold off by the Biden administration. That does not sound like an emergency on our southern border. They're trying to literally game the American people because his poll numbers are down. This is not an actual issue of solving the problem of the border. This is solving the problem with voters.
Senator, if you have time, I'd like to hold you for one more segment after the break here, because we now have Chris Christie, who says that Donald Trump cannot get elected if he's found guilty of just one felony. It's almost as if we have people in the Republican Party, disgruntled former friends of Trump or former employees and so forth, who want him to be found guilty by these phony charges in these phony courtrooms. We're here with Senator Tim Scott, who is on the short list potentially to be the number 2 on the Trump ticket. Is it not weird, Senator Scott, that we have people like Chris Christie and others actually rooting for Donald Trump to be convicted of some felony in a corrupt situation in Georgia, corrupt situation in New York, this outrageous situation in Washington and so forth? They're actually rooting for this. They want Biden to win, or they're thinking of running no labels. Maybe they should win, like Chris Christie. What do you make of that?
Nothing whatsoever. Unbelievable. We need a united party behind Donald Trump. We were better off under Trump. Let me give you, Mark, 5 crystal clear reasons why we need Donald Trump, and any Republican that takes any votes away from our next president, Donald Trump, is actually leading to the destruction and perhaps the decimation of another American century. Number 1, the border. Under Joe Biden, we've had the greatest invasion in the history of the country. And since October, more than 1 million people have crossed our border illegally. Mark, we know hundreds on our national security watch list crossed our southern border. Number 2, crime is devastating. Community after community after community. Joe Biden and the progressives have preached the gospel of defund the police. It was President Trump that restored law and order. It was President Trump that stood with respect. And we should refund the police, the poorest communities. Oftentimes, black people, Hispanics, are being devastated by crime. They want law and order, which means that President Trump, over 40% in the Hispanic community, over 40% of black men looking for Trump to be the next president. Number three, if you are a millennial, you cannot buy a home because of Joe Biden, high inflation, high interest rates, and low opportunity. Number four, the polarization we see in America. Joe Biden, he's the guy that said, you ain't black if you don't vote for him. Can you imagine, Mark, if that was a Republican saying that? Can you imagine the kind of disaster?
No, it's unbelievable.
I can't even imagine.
No.
And number five, Mark, believe it or not, weaponizing the justice system against political opponents while protecting your own family and Democrats has become the way of life under Joe Biden. And it gets worse. The Treasury Department, I'll say this tomorrow during my hearings, the Treasury Department has actually been using keyword searches like if you put in MAGA, if you are looking to buy a Bible, if you're going to the Bass Pro Shop, they're using keywords to target conservatives and religious people. It sounds like the Obama years when the IRS targeted Jewish groups, Christian groups, and conservatives. We cannot have the United States government weaponized against people with a conservative philosophy, Republicans, and religious communities. It is wrong.
No, you're 100% right. And I want to thank you, Senator, for the way you express yourself. You've got a lot of emotion behind this. You love your country. And I want to wish you all the best. I've gotten to know you. You're really a stand-up guy. You're solid. You're principled. You come under a lot of vicious racial attacks from the left, both blacks, whites, and others. And I'm sorry about that. Others have as well. And it's really grotesque. But that said, you're very courageous. You stand up. You say what you need to say. And I want to thank you, Senator Scott. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for those kind comments. I will say without any question, Mark Levin tells the truth. Keep listening. Thank you, Mark.
God bless you, my friend.